Hey everyone, welcome back. This is month 12 of the TQS Block of the Month for 2014. I'm Julie Cephalou and I've been traveling with you this whole journey. This quilt, it's A to Z for You and Me, designed by Janet Stone, and it's a beautiful alphabet sampler, and I am having so much fun with it, and we're getting down to the end and we're gonna start working on a couple of little things with the binding and a flange. So I'm going to show you that process and how it works. So let's take a look down here. I made a little sample, and this is a great idea to use some of the alphabet blocks from the quilt for something else. So this was the flying geese block, which was really just this portion right here, and I added another row of flying geese to the other side. And then I printed out some other letters. I found a font online, and this is for MK, who is a good friend of mine. So anyways, there's just some great ideas that you can use with this pattern for some little gift projects. So I want to show you how we do the flange and the binding per the instructions that Janet has come up with, and I think it's just a great way to do this. So the lime green is what the flange is, and it's made up of a strip of fabric that's 1.5 inches wide, and it's on the straight of grain. You're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, similar to what you would do with a binding, and you're going to lay it onto the quilt top. And remember, at this point your quilt has been quilted, and so you've got the 3 layers here, and I've done 3 sides of this quilt already with the flange. But basically you're taking these raw edges of the flange and you're going to lay it on the edge of your quilt, even with the raw edge of your quilt top. So this one would go right here along those raw edges. It's a little bit bigger, it's hanging over on the sides here, and you can glue this down. I chose to stitch it with my walking foot on a basting stitch, so like a 5.0 for my machine, and stitch it with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. And it overlaps the corners here on each end. So the first 2, you'll do 2 sides first, and then the other 2 sides will come on after it, and they just overlap on the ends here. So once you've got those stitched in place, you would then trim these even with the other 2 sides. And then you're ready to put the binding on. And what is fun about this binding is it's all done by machine. And instead of adding the binding to the front of your quilt and then wrapping it to the back, we're going to start on the back of the quilt and then wrap it to the front. So let me show you how I've done that. So here's the back of the quilt, and here's my binding strip. These are cut at 2 3/8 of an inch wide and pressed together, wrong sides together. And you're going to put the binding raw edges even, and you're going to start stitching from the back side a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I've done this, and I'm doing these mitered corners. Let me come on over to this corner here so I can just review how I do the mitered corner. I'm stitching a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and when I get a 1/4 of an inch before the end of this side, I stop and I pivot and stitch out to the corner. You can back stitch here if you want, but I like to just pivot and stitch out to the corner. I feel like it just gives me a better corner on my bindings. Then I'm going to take this binding strip, fold it up and away. I should have a nice straight line from this side of the quilt going straight up to my binding, and this should be a nice 45-degree angle right here. I'm going to fold it right back down on itself, and now this folded edge should be even with this side, and I should have a nice straight corner here too. Then I'm going to start stitching right at this folded edge, and I'm going to continue down till I get to the next corner. And again, that's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once I stitch the binding down, I like to iron it, and I take it over to the ironing board to do that. So here I've got the binding fabric stitched on, and I like to iron it flat out and just like that, just to make it easier to wrap around the quilt top. And then I'll take the tip of the iron and push it into the corners like that. And then I want to show you what we're going to do on the front. So let's turn it around, and I'm going to come back over here. Get this binding out of the way. Okay, so now we're going to bring this binding around the front, and we want to be certain that we cover those stitches that I used to base the flange on, and we'll wrap it around to the front. And now you get to stitch this down by machine. You could do it by hand, but I think by machine you can have a lot more options. You could use a decorative stitch here. I love these little binding clips that'll hold that in place for me. Got a couple of these. And let me show you the corner over here. That corner will just automatically miter. You just have to kind of fiddle with the corner. You fold one end down and then the other end like that. There's a beautiful miter there. And now we're going to stitch. You can straight stitch right along the fold here. You could do a blanket stitch, a decorative stitch. You have a lot of choices. Just remember that on the back, that stitching is going to probably fall right next to the binding here. So you might want to use a bobbin thread that matches the backing of your quilt, and then you will have a completed quilt top, and you will have a beautiful alphabet sampler block. So make sure you enter these quilts that you've made into a show. I know Janet has been winning lots of ribbons with hers, and I know that you guys will too. She would love to see that you guys have done the same thing. Make sure that you give Janet proper credit as the designer of the quilt, and watch for more things from Janet. I know this is probably, I think, the 13th in a series that she's been doing, and I know she's got lots more to come in the future. I also want to remind you to print out all of the paper patterns before the end of the year. The videos that I've been doing will be available on the Quilt Show website for years to come, but the paper pattern you need to print out so that we can make room for next year's block of the month. I've had so much fun working with this quilt and with these blocks, and working with all of you, the TQS audience. I know that I'm going to enjoy my quilt for many years to come. Thanks a lot for joining me.